Good afternoon, everyone. So good to see you all here. We're moving on with the months of the year and looking at the month of Cheshvan, which is from the beginning of the year. It is in fact the 8th month, counting from Nisan, but we're looking at this as being month number 2. Right, Tishrei being Rosh Hashanah, the first in the beginning of the year, but also the 7th month. So we're going to stick with this being the 2nd month, but we're going to bring up the 8th month. Sorry, there's always a little bit of confusion with all of these things. We need to start with the 3 cardinal principles that I have formulated and which you're entitled to argue with me about as you wish. Stars are just stars. They have no power, significance, value, meaning, abilities of their own. They indicate something. They help us understand things. It's a picture. It's a drawing. It's a means of understanding things. They align to form a picture or drawing according to how we see it from our point of view in time and space. Someone on another planet would see these things very differently. Number 2, it's not prescriptive. If you are looking at these texts, and we're going to do a reading for the month of Cheshvan, this is not going to tell you what to do in the month of Cheshvan. Who you should marry, for example, since the good people sitting here seem to be single. Who you should not marry, what you should think of whoever you're dating or not, what business you go into. It's going to give you some advice. It's going to give you some help, something to think about. Understand yourself a little bit better. But lottery numbers and who to marry, definitely not. And it is, of course, the Hebrew months only, which is, of course, one of the biggest revelations for people coming into this from the outside or from never having done any of this before. It is referring to the Hebrew months only. So we're going to be taking a look at a book called the Shem Mishmuel, which was written by Rabbi Shmuel Bornstein. I can be really smart. I've got a page printed out from Wikipedia. 1855 to 1926. Right, so we're going a little bit ahead in time from where we've been in terms of the great Hasidic masters. He was the 2nd Rebbe of the Sukkot dynasty. I have a picture of him. Seriously impressive looking guy. Leading Hasidic thinker. Major advantage is that he does write relatively easily. He's not the most difficult to read. The other side of the coin is there's a lot of it. There's a lot of text, and he does go off into different asides. And you do need to do a little bit of prep before you get down to reading him. So we're going to be spending a fair amount of time just on the Bible text. But what he's doing in this particular piece that we're looking at, and that we're going to be looking at, is tell us a greater level of detail into how the stars align with the months, the constellations, and the tribes, right? Because we know anything that's 12 is fair game for connecting with the 12 months of the year, and the tribes of Israel is right up there with all of this. But he's going to tell us how this works, how it happens, and specifically how it works with the first 2 months of the year, Tishrei and Cheshvan, which connect with Ephraim and Menasha in terms of the tribes. Right? He's going to be quoting his father, Rav Avraham Bornstein, 1838 to 1910. Major halachic authority as well as the founder of the dynasty of Sukkot. And pretty much all of what we know of his Hasidic writings, you definitely will need a Bible, Hasidic writings, comes to us through his son. So a lot of the time, Reb Shmuel is going to say, Dad said this, but he will of course refer to him with great reverence and respect because the father was his only teacher and his main teacher. There are meta lessons here, right, to take a sort of nice term and alt term. You learn a lot from Chassidut. You learn a lot from reading from the Hasidic rabbis. But yet, when you take a step back and you see what's going on and you start to think about it all, there is even bigger lessons that come out of all of this. And one of them is a learning relationship with a parent or parent figure. You've got to have a spiritual father, spiritual mother. And that doesn't necessarily have to be your biological parent, right? Some of us had smart parents, some of us have parents that are not so smart. Some of us have parents who are religiously observant and knowledgeable Jews who taught us lots of Torah, and some of us didn't. And that's the way life is, but you've got to have that sort of person in your life. And that's one of the things that we definitely learn from all of this. We're going to meet also Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Rimanov, a little bit earlier, 1745 to 1815. And we're going to get a very well-known quote from him that will come into all of this. Okay? Deep breath. We're going to do some serious Bible reading here, because without it, you're really not going to get what Reb Shmuel of Safechav is saying. He has a lot to say, and it takes us into a fairly different focus from what we've been talking about before. The last couple of months we were looking at the names of the princes of the tribes, and we were looking at also the gemstones that associate with the particular tribe. Here we're looking at the tribe itself, and specifically the name of the progenitor of the tribe. Right? Great English word. You will know what a progenitor is. Right? The father of the tribe. And specifically we're looking at Jacob and his 12 sons. Although it's going to expand a little bit, because we're going to go to Jacob, his 12 sons, plus 2 grandchildren. So that's 14 people. And they're still only 12 months. So there's something that we're looking at here, but that is an incredibly mystical and profound thought that is out there but doesn't have any real explanation to it. And it is in the Mea Shiloach of Mordechai Yosef of Ishbitz. We're talking about him for the last, I don't know how many weeks, 7, 8 weeks or so. The whole process of human existence and all of history is moving from 12 to 13. And then he says nothing else. Absolutely nothing else about it. Moving from a place where there are 12 tribes and 12 constellations and 12 months to a place where all the tribes are there and there are 13 months. Because we know there are 13 months. Occasionally there's a leap month. So this is part of the process of moving towards the ultimate future. And we're going to dip into this as well. We're going to dip into it in terms of the letters of the alphabet. Right? You all know your Hebrew letters, right? Of course you do. You at least know the names and the sounds of the letters. If you need a bit of help with that, talk to us. We have time, or I have time, right? Okay. The English translated pages, translations are entirely my own and are, of course, filled with mistakes, spelling errors, despite amazing spell checkers on computers and all that sort of stuff. We're going to look at, firstly, the Sefer Yetzirah, the book of creation, which is the absolute source for all of this stuff. And in chapter 5, we have the list of 5 things that connect with each particular month. And they are the letter Nun. God made the letter Nun king over smell. So a lot of the time, the Hasidic rabbis are going to start talking about what on earth does that mean? What does the letter Nun refer to? And what has smell got to do with the month of Cheshvan? We're going to come to some of that. Not a lot of it, but some of it. Generally, the letter is usually represented as having a power and a very positive influence, and it becomes the king over the sense of smell, or the other senses. We're not going to get that here, but we're going to get it in some of the other letters. Together they form the constellation Scorpio, the scorpion. How do you say scorpion in Hebrew? Akrav, exactly. You're going to have to know this word. Ayin, Kuf, Resh, Bet. Akrav. Where it's written down here. I've done most of the work for you, and we're gonna get to it.
Okay.
There will not be a test on this, so don't worry. No final exam. If you learn this, wonderful. You get something out of it. We're all very happy. But some of the details can be a little bit tension producing. Don't worry about it. Take a deep breath. We're going to move on. Right. So the scorpion and the picture of the scorpion and what it represents. We would tend to look at a scorpion as being a pretty negative thing. I don't think there's a positive side to the scorpion, but Reb Shmuel is going to come up with one, and he's going to tell us what we should be doing. The months line up. Okay, basic aside here. In conventional astrology, the months line up in many different ways. First, 1 to 7, 2 to 8, that sort of way. The months go in pairs, and that's what we're looking at here, Tishrei and Cheshvan. So month number 1 and number 2, which is actually in this sort of numeration, 7 and 8. All right, sorry to keep doing this. Math is not my strong point. Counting I'm really bad at. So math was my best subject in high school, and all gone. Those brain cells were killed by something or other over the years. But month number 7 and number 8, counting from Nisan as the first month of the year. That is a pair. So then month number 9 and 10, 11 and 12, etc., etc. The months also do connect in threes. So we will look, maybe if we have time, at other sources that will say Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev go together. The months also connect in fours, right? So you have three sets of 4. The months also connect in 6s. The first half of the year, the second half of the year. So again, emphasizing the very, very fundamental point, which goes back to one of our cardinal principles somehow or other. This is not a precise science. And if there is something in this that is valuable to you, then this has been a valuable exercise. If not, we'll move on to the next thing and you'll find something valuable there. Right, so the last line of the Sefer Yetzirah piece is the intestine in the soul of male and female. Generally speaking, we're not looking at how we would look at our innards. What does your intestine do? Eliminates waste, takes the good stuff out of the food. And you will see this. You will see this as part of the meaning as well. But we are ultimately looking here at the month of Cheshvan as it is presented to us by Reb Shmuel of Sachachav. So we've got to go back and just think very carefully through the lists of the 12 tribes, right? The tribes line up with a month. 12 tribes, 12 months. In the book of Exodus and Sefer Shemot, the tribes include the tribes of Joseph and the tribes of Levi. They are the 12 sons of Jacob, literally. When we get to the book of Numbers, to chapter 1 and 2, we have Joseph out and Levi out. And they are replaced by Ephraim and Menasha, the 2 grandsons of Jacob. So we still have 12 tribes. Right? So here at the very beginning, we're going to go Lefi Seder Hadgalim, which is the very first line that we'll hit. We are going to be looking at the tribes as they are enumerated in the book of Numbers, according to their marching order through the wilderness on the way to the Promised Land. Okay, so far not too difficult, right? Third text on the page, which takes us to Genesis chapter 41. Right? So if you have a little bit of time, you might want to do a little bit of homework. Sefer Bereshit, book of Genesis, chapter 41, and then 48. The story of Joseph in Egypt. Right? Reasonably familiar, I hope.
Yes.
Yeah, of course it is. Even if you haven't done much Bible study before, you do know this. And here we're going to have to dip a little bit into the Hebrew, and I've reproduced it for you. Right? You know the whole story. Joseph is sold as a slave into Egypt by his brothers instead of killing him. I'm not sure which is better, but in any event, Joseph does in the long run say, God made this happen so good things can happen. Right? Very, very inspirational story. But we're looking here at Joseph's two children. Right? Joseph named the firstborn Menasha. This is chapter 41, verse number 52. Joseph named his firstborn Menasha because God has caused me to forget all my toil and all my father's house. All the difficulties that I have had up to this time, God has made me forget it all. It's gone. Nun, shin, nun. Right? We're not going to do the grammar of it all. Right? But Nashani and Menasha are very obviously the same root. Right? Hebrew names always mean something. The second one he called Ephraim because God had made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. He calls the second son Ephraim, Ki Hifrani, Hey, Pe, Resh, Nun, Yud, Hifrani from the terminology of Peri. To be fruitful. First, God made all the bad go away by making me forget. And then God made all sorts of good things here by making me fruitful and having these two wonderful children. Right? Firstborn is Menasha, secondborn is Ephraim. Zip ahead to Genesis 48. This is all going to come up in the first paragraph in the Shem Mishmua, so we need to get this into our minds for a bit. Jacob. Jacob is dying. Very end of the book of Genesis, Sefer Bereshit. Jacob is about to die, and Joseph brings his two sons to him for a blessing. Right? So this blessing thing is really, really serious. And Israel, Jacob, stretched out his right hand and placed it on Ephraim's head, although he was the younger. And his left hand he placed on Menashe's head. He guided his hands deliberately, for Menashe was the firstborn. Right? The text continues. There's a few more lines where Joseph says, no, put your right hand on the head of my firstborn and your left hand on the head of my secondborn child. But Jacob says, no, I'm switching the order here. Right? The younger child is going to come first. What he's ultimately going to be reading into this is that Ephraim is going to be Tishrei, and Menashe is going to be Cheshvan. And that's where we're going. And this is a direction and a method of getting into the new year and of going through life. We're going to see how this spells out. Forget stuff, move away from the past, put aside the bad things that have happened, the bad things that you have been doing, and then be fruitful and multiply and do lots of good. So that's the Ephraim and Menashe. So those are chapters that are worth reading, really inspirational stories. And the next one that we're going to look at is the first book of Kings, chapter 12. I'm sure you're all very familiar with the book of Kings, right? Yeah, of course you are. You've at least heard of this once. What happens after King Solomon dies? Merely a quick test of your general biblical knowledge. Now, pass. You have a split in the kingdom. Exactly. Right? First three kings of Israel are Saul, David, Solomon. Solomon dies, and his son is called Rehoboam, I believe is correctly in English. Right? Okay, that's pretty much the same in different languages, but Rehoboam, and he is not the wisest of people. He is about to be crowned as king, and the people get together and say, excuse me, your royal prince and soon to be king, we owe you our respect and honor, etc., but please, a little less taxation. Right? Reasonable requests. King Solomon built a temple. King Solomon built Jerusalem. King Solomon built palaces. King Solomon maintained an army. How did he do that? Through taxation. And taxation in those days was not just money. Taxation was a percentage of your crops, and taxation was your people. They would take one person from each family, however the percentages were worked out. There is some indication of it in other parts of the Bible, that you would give 1 month per year of labor. If you were a carpenter or a woodworker or a brick worker, you were conscripted for 30 days work per year. So that's not entirely a very nice way of doing things. On the other hand, 1 month out of 12 to work, what's the statistic of how the average person works how many months of a year to pay their average tax burden? It's more than a month.
I think they said like 100 days.
Right, it's something like 3 or 4 months.
In Brazil, it's like...
It's, wow. It's a very good reason to leave Brazil, right? I think in America it's somewhere in the 3 or 4 month range. And so giving 1 month of actual physical labor over to the king and building his palaces wasn't so bad, but they were complaining. They were complaining. And in chapter 12, verse number 11, you should go home and read this yourselves. I've reproduced a couple of the pieces here, and I've done my best to emphasize and highlight the words and the terms that we're going to be needing here. Rechavam says, "Where my father did burden you with a heavy yoke, I shall add to your yoke." All right? Yoke means burden. My father flogged you with whips, but I will flog you with scorpions. Isn't that a nice thing to say to people? I'm going to increase your tax burden. The term scorpion, akrav, is of course a very, very obvious connection to the month of Akrav. This is the month of the Akrav. This is where it happens. This is the month of the scorpion. In real terms, if you want to be particular, probably an Akrav is a term for a very nasty whip with barbs on it. Rather than picking up a scorpion. I don't see how you could pick up a scorpion and whip someone with it, but I don't want to even think about it. It's the beginning of one of the James Bond movies, right? None of you people watch movies, of course. You're much more pure and good and virtuous. But it's one of the James Bond movies where multiple times they kill him by having him get bit by a scorpion and then he comes back. No? Okay. Good stuff to not remember. My head is full of rubbish like this. I will add to your yoke. My father, King Solomon, whipped you with whips. I'm going to whip you with scorpions. This is obviously a reference to something not good happening in the 8th month of the year. And indeed, we're going to see this is the 8th month. And all of Israel saw that the king did not listen to them. And they replied to the king, saying, "What share do we have in David, and no heritage in the son of Yishai? To your homes, O Israel. Now see your house, David." And the Israelites went to their homes. This is a reasonable response to a very bad, difficult king who promises to make life worse for them. And you cannot blame the northern kingdom for seceding, the 10 tribes for saying, we don't want any part in this whole Israel thing, if this is what the king is going to be. It makes sense. Nonetheless, there is a great deal of loyalty, and there is religious stuff, and there is spiritual stuff that has to do with, number one, a descendant of King David, a descendant of the tribe of Judah being on the throne of Israel, and the temple being in Jerusalem, and all that sort of good stuff. So this is considered to be a serious rejection of God's selection of Jerusalem, of the tribe of Judah, and the house of King David. So now we get back to the word akrav, scorpion. And this is what I've done my best to write out here for you in the middle there. Akrav, ayin kuf resh bet, is taken to be akar bet, uprooted the letter bet. Bet meaning bayit, meaning a house, So the people of Israel, 10 out of 12 of the tribes, uprooted from themselves, or uprooted themselves from, the Bayit, the house, which was the Beit HaMikdash, the temple, and Beit David, the house, the family of King David. So this is another implication and meaning of the whole Akrav of the scorpion thing. Zipping on a little bit in the chapter, this is chapter 12 in the first book of Kings still. Very, very end. Jeroboam, who is Jeroboam? Who is Yeravam?
First king of the northern.
He is the first king of the northern kingdom. He is brought back from exile, and he is appointed king of the north. There's really interesting stuff here in the text and in Midrash and in the commentary, so it's really worth looking at, where God has this talk with Yeravam, who is supposedly the leader of the rebellion, of the revolution against King David. And God says, I'm okay with this. Just do the mitzvahs, be a good king. Help the poor, do charitable acts and the like. And we're going to be fine. You can be king, I'll be with you, it'll be good. Of course, it doesn't work out like that. What does Jeroboam do? He made a festival in the 8th month. He's got this big problem. All the people of the 10 northern tribes that go with him, when they separate out from the nation of Israel, they still owe their religious allegiance to the temple in Jerusalem. What are they going to do? Jeroboam decides he's going to set up 2 temples within his territory. And then he makes a festival in the 8th month, on the 15th day of the month, like the festival which was in Judah. What festival is that? Sukkot, right? So a month after Sukkot, he makes a new festival. And he brought up offerings on the altar, and he did so in Bet El to slaughter the calves, etc., etc. Here's the point. It's verse number 33. He brought up offerings on the altar, which was in Beth El, on the 15th day of the 8th month. And this is the precise terminology. I'm going to read you the Hebrew. Vaya'al al hamizbech asher asa beveit El. He brought an offering on the altar, which was in Beth El. He did it himself, right? So taking completely away from Kohanim, Leviim, from the priests, the Levites, etc. On the 15th day of the 8th month, B'chodesh asher bada mi libo. It seems to be a totally superfluous couple of words here. He did this on the 15th day of the 8th month, in the month which he invented from his heart. He fabricated, is the translation I've got here. Right? There's absolutely no need to say in the month that he made up from his heart. And Reb Shmuel is going to go on to that, and he's going to say that he took the essence of the Chodesh, the month, the cycle of the moon, which represents the kingship of David, which represents the nation of Israel. It waxes and wanes. We are up and we are down, but it is a cycle. And he did something with that hit chad shut. A month is called a Chodesh, the moon is called the Chodesh, and he perverted this process. He made up a whole negative aspect to all of this renewal cycle. And this was an incredibly bad thing, of course. All right, so this is the Bible text that we've been dealing with. And I've done my best to translate the Hebrew as well as I can. And hopefully it will make a certain amount of sense to you. And here we go. If you're looking on the Hebrew side, it's where it says Yud Gimel, the extreme extreme left. We are reading a talk from Rosh Chodesh Mar Cheshvan, the year is 5672. It's October 23rd, 1911. Right, so 100 and something years ago, 107 or 8 years ago. Lefi Seder HaDegalim, following the order of the tribe's flags, their encampment. That's why I started by emphasizing all of these Bible texts. This month connects with Menasha. And we have already written about this in another place, that the names of Menasha and Ephraim refer to the prescription of the book of Psalms 34, verse 14, which says, Sur Meirah, turn aside, leave bad, and do good. Right? Seems like a reasonable thing to have as your motto. Stop doing bad things and then start doing good things. Right? This is what we have in the book of Psalms. And this was, up to a certain point, the way of doing things in life. First stop doing the bad and then doing the good. Menasha, Milashon Nashani Elokim, God has caused me to forget all of my toil and all of my labors. This we take to mean Sur Meirah, forgetting, moving aside, walking away from the bad life that I had in the past. Right? Ve'Ephraim milashon ki hifrani Elokim be'eretz onyi. God has made me fruitful, has given me the opportunity to grow here in this land of affliction. That is, do good, even when things going around you are not so wonderful. Lachein, and it is for this reason that Joseph wanted his father to bless Menasha first. Right? Obviously, the book of Psalms has not been written in the time of Jacob and his sons, right? But the issue is, when we're reading these texts here, time doesn't mean anything. The fact that a book hasn't yet been written doesn't mean its basic thoughts don't exist. And it's all a level playing field in terms of equality and value of the texts. So Joseph wanted his father to bless Menasha before Ephraim, as we have this verse in Psalm number 34, which does, of course, seem to be the absolute normal way of doing things. First, you stop doing something bad, then you start doing something good. If you are pulled and compelled to eat non-kosher food, for example, first stop eating non-kosher food and then cashier your kitchen and start eating kosher food. We're going to try and stick with pretty safe examples here that hopefully will not hurt people too badly. But what did Yaakov do? Jacob, our father, introduced a different way in avodah. What does avodah mean? Avodah means work, it means labor, it means service of God, it means working on yourself. This is what we are supposed to be doing. Our avodah in this world is what we are supposed to be doing. So Jacob says, start by doing good, and then it's much easier to leave the bad behind. Yaakov Avinu alav hashalom, Jacob our father, may he rest in peace, chidesh derech acher. He introduced this. It's a completely new method. First do good, and then mimela in and of itself, it's going to be much, much easier to stop doing the bad. Once you get a taste of how good life is when you're following the right path, then you can much more easily say, oh, those bad things that I used to do, I can just forget about them. Because to wait to do good until you remove all the bad from your life, zeh kashem ma'od, this is far too difficult to do. V'al kain, hachodashim ha'ela, these 2 months, so he's putting together Tishrei and Mar Cheshvan, connect first to Ephraim and then to Menasha in that particular order. And that's what Jacob was doing when he set this up by reversing the blessing order and placing the second-born before the firstborn. Right? We're reading a lot into a little bit of text here. But we've done this before, and this is really a refinement of something that we started off many weeks back with, the very well-known story of Abraham and the stars, right? Where Abraham says to God, I see in my constellations, in my astrological readings, that I am not going to have any children. And God takes Abraham outside, raises him above the canopy of the stars, the orbits of the stars, and says, here, from my point of view, I pull the strings, you can pull these strings too. And metaphorically, of course. So that is a general statement of how a Jewish person, of how a spiritually attuned person has the ability to take some of the things that are out there in terms of basic programming of the cosmos and say, I can put this under my control. Here we're going to be a bit more specific. It's another layer of meaning. And it's another layer in the origin story of how we get to all of this stuff. And how we control our destiny, the month that we are in at the moment, the month that we're looking forward to, or the month of our birth, if you happen to be a Scorpio born in the month of Cheshvan. Okay? So these months refer specifically to Ephraim and then Menasha. Tishrei, the first month of the year, is we do good. Because there are many, many mitzvot in the month of Tishrei. The shofar, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Lulav, all of these things. Nisuch hamayim, the water libation, at the end of the holiday of Sukkot, he adds in here. Hu besur meirah. Wrong one. That is, of course, aseh tov, that is doing good, and that is Ephraim. And then we come to the month of Mar Cheshvan, which is Sur Meirah, turn aside from doing bad. V'alkein mazalo akrav. Right? So he's not being entirely parallel here. Right? He's not referring to the mazal, to the constellation of Tishri at all. The constellation for Tishri is the Moznayim, is the scales. Right? Libra. And he's not referring to that at all. He's saying there's loads of mitzvahs to do in the month of Tishrei. So it's a month of doing good, of getting a jump start on changing your life, because most of the month you've got nothing else to do but observe chagim, holidays, and enjoy doing all these mitzvot. But when we come into the month of Mar Cheshvan, there are no specified holidays, which is not to say it's an empty month. Right, that's a whole separate lesson on the Mar Cheshvan of the future, that it's going to be the month of the dedication of the next temple. But that's a whole other lesson in a whole other branch of Chassidut. The constellation of the month of Cheshvan is going to tell us something relative to the month of Tishri, which is full of mitzvot, lots of good things to do. We then move into the month of the Scorpion. Hinei kakav kvod kodsho, my father, the Admor of blessed memory. Right here we got a huge lesson in all of this good stuff. This is where the Shem Yishmael is amazing. He just takes the time to explain stuff to you. He says, this is the top of page Yud Daled, and we're about halfway down page 2 in the English translation. The tribes line up with the 12 months of the year. What does this mean? Hainu, shebezuchutam higbihu et Yisrael lemala meha mazalot. That through their merit, through the actions of the 12 sons of Jacob, they raised Israel above the constellations. Right? Same thing as God taking Abraham and raising him above the stars and saying it's all yours. Here the 12 tribes have done the work specifically for each individual month, and the month that lines up with their tribe, with their name. Okay? Da'af shahamazal moshech b'tiv'o. Even though the individual constellation pulls b'tiv'o with its nature, l'dvarim bilti ru'uyim, towards things that are not appropriate. There is something out there in the month of the Scorpion that pulls you in a negative direction, in a way of doing things, in a way of feeling that is not good. Right? I'm intentionally skipping a few lines in the Hebrew here. Mikol makom, Israel, us, we have the ability to rule over the powers of those constellations. And because of this, the mazal, the constellation, does not work on us at all. Right? That's the verse in Jeremiah which backs this up. Do not be afraid from the signs of the heavens. The nations are dismayed from them, but you, the Jewish people, those of you who are in the spiritual know, are not dismayed and are not bothered by it. There is something about the akrav, something about the scorpion that we're going to discover that may or may not have anything to do with its actual nature. I don't remember National Geographic specials on scorpions, but I'm sure there is such a thing. Right? So now he's going to start explaining. Here's a little bit about what my dad taught me, and I have got something else to say based on that. All right, we're still looking good in the video. Yay! All right, so second paragraph from the Hebrew, about the second paragraph from the bottom in the English. V'li yesh losif, I want to add to what Dad said. There is something in the stars, but the tribes each worked on each of their own constellations and made it their own and brought it under their power and gave that as an inheritance to us. This is our birthright. It's our birthright as spiritually attuned human beings, as Jewish people, to be able to pull those strings and make the stars and the constellations and what they represent work for us. So, Vavraham Misachachov says the following. And then the son, Reb Shmuel, comes and adds to it. Shalodai, it's not enough, not just are we not drawn after the Hora'at Hamazal. Hora'ah is usually the word teaching, the direction. There's something about the month. There's something about the constellation that goes with it. We are not drawn that way. Ella Shehem, here we go. We're going to get into some deeply Kabbalistic stuff here. But this is a very, very important principle in Zohar, in the Kabbalah, in understanding what things are about. Shehem magbiim hora'at hamazal l'shorsha. We are able to elevate the constellation to its source in the upper spiritual worlds and use its power for holy purposes. What do we mean by this? So this is real. This is a real Zohar piece that you have to understand. You have to let it sink in a little bit. That it's only in the world that we see and touch that there's such a thing as good and bad. As you rise up through the spiritual worlds, in other words, in very simple English, the closer you get to God, the less bad there is. You come up to a level that is really high, then what we see here as something bad is actually good. because it's inconceivable that there should be anything bad or negative that comes out from God. That when God sends good things down to us, he is only sending good things down to us. And it's only after these things go through the spiritual realms, do we find that, there's something not so great here. Right? So our abilities are, number one, based on the progenitors of the tribes having done the spiritual work before us and laid the groundwork for us, but also we have this ability too. We can take the negative factors of this month, the scorpion, the nasty stuff of the scorpion, we're not talking about this thing at all. We can take some of the things of the scorpion, raise them up, use them for good, holy, and positive purposes. Okay? Let's take an example, he says, the mashal. Chodesh mar Cheshvan, she'anu medabrim bo. This month that we are now talking about, its constellation is the scorpion. The Yadua. Yadua seems to be a key word. It is known. It is known from many places in the Zohar as a whole. She'akrav hu kerirut. The scorpion refers to coldness. It's a cold-blooded creature. It is a killer that doesn't have any argument with its victim. Right? The scorpion and the snake are cold versus hot in this sort of picture. A snake will confront you. Again, I know nothing about these things, but a snake will confront you, hiss at you, and then bite you. A scorpion sneaks up on you and then stings you. Right? May none of us ever meet such things or have such unfortunate encounters. But this is the picture we are looking at. The nature of the scorpion draws people to be lazy and to sit and do nothing. Kol ma sheyaseh, everything that it does with coldness of spirit. V'lo beruacham, not with a warm spirit, v'itlahavut, and certainly not with enthusiasm. So the Scorpio factor, a month that has no holidays to it at all, as we now see it, is laziness, coldness, boredom. I've got nothing to do. And even if I have something to do, I just couldn't be bothered doing it. I'd rather stay home. V'Yisrael, this is Reb Shmuel talking here, V'Yisrael mishtamshim v'amidah hayatzma. And Jewish people, the people of Israel, use this character trait to turn away from evil and to be lazy about actions that are not appropriate. What good is laziness and boredom? Laziness is good when you have a choice and an inclination to do something that is not so good. I'll go take a walk and I'll go into this non-kosher restaurant and have myself a cheeseburger, right? And a milkshake, right? Make it even worse. But I'm too lazy to do that. It's hot. I'll get all sweaty. It's not worth it. And I'm bored anyway, and that's not going to cheer me up. This is a positive, valuable, and useful application of the nature of the scorpion: laziness, coldness, boredom. I've had enough cheeseburgers this week, right? Furthermore, even ordinary things of this physical world, everything of the physical world, hamuchrachim, things that we even need, food, for example, clothing, housing, yubekirut ruach. We should deal with these things with a coldness of spirit. Because after all, the physical stuff of this world is not what it's all about. We are looking towards the spiritual realms and to much bigger and better things. And The things of this world, whether we like them or we love them, are all described from this point of view as Ra, Resh Ayin, something that is bad, that is not of the absolute best. Right? Jewish people and the Jewish thought doesn't have a very strong ascetic trend in it. Right? We're not into deprivation. We like to eat. We like to enjoy life, and that's a good thing. We're urged to get married. We're urged to have children. We're urged to dress well or reasonably well and to eat well, right? And make a living, right? Not wander the streets and be beggars. Nonetheless, it's not an unhealthy thing for us to introduce a certain amount of coldness and disinterest in a lot of the things. I know I like my electronic toys. I very much like my tablet and my computer and my laptop and my noise-canceling headphones and all of these little gizmos. But it would do me an awful lot of good if I would have a certain amount of coldness to these toys. But this is something to work on. This is the month of Cheshvan. This is the month of Menasha, where I am trying to forget. And this is the stage that we have after we've already started to do good. So, to pick on myself, I should spend more time with physical holy books and less time playing with my nice little Samsung tablet that, in addition to being filled with wonderful holy books, has comics and sci-fi books that I like to waste time with. First, do the good. Then, once you get a taste of the good, it's an awful lot easier to walk away from doing some of the not so good. Right? And we can expand the examples very, very, very easily. None of us here are particularly evil people who do terrible things. But we do have stuff. We do have things in our lives, and when we're looking at the list of mitzvot and do's and don'ts, and we're looking at relationships that we have with people we are supposed to care about, right? There are things that we do that are not up to snuff, as they say, right? We don't play according to the rules in business, in our dealings with nonprofits, or any sort of things that we do. There's always something that we can improve. There's always somewhere that we can go better in. But the issue is, give yourself the boost of the Tishrei, of the do the good, select something good, nice, reaffirming, and then you've got power. You've got the ability to say, hey, I'm doing this good already, I might as well. And it's a lot easier for me now to leave aside some of the negative stuff. Right? And with this, we're on the bottom of page number 2. There's a lot of stuff, right? This is a lot of stuff. Now we understand the Sefer Yetzirah. Now we understand that which is written in the Sefer Yetzirah that we had at the beginning. He's giving you this as a quotation from the Bnei Yissaschar. The Bnei Yissaschar is the writings of Rav Tzvi Elimelech of Dinov, who is probably the major authority on this subject, and certainly the big writer on all of these things, that we're dealing with the letter Nun and smell and dakin, the intestines. I've intentionally not translated the next couple of paragraphs because he really takes quite a while to say what he has to say. The connection of the letter Nun to the month of Mar Cheshvan is a little bit complicated. There are 2 forms of the letter Nun. Right? This is the last thing we're going to do today. I don't want your heads to explode on this one. There are two forms of the letter Nun. Right? Reasonably familiar. The letter Nun, which looks like a sort of backwards squared off C, and then there's a straight line down. Right? That is the Nun of the present. The regular letter nun is the nun of the present. And then the future letter nun is the straight line. Oy. Okay? These indicate a number of different things. The letter nun, as it is now, bent over, refers to turning away from evil. Turning away, bending yourself over to the will of God. Observing the negative commandments, fear, which leads to purity, which leads to a good smell. Once you are pure, you're sweet smelling. Whereas the nun of the future, which is standing up, is do good, the positive commandments, love of God, holiness, and the month of Tishrei. Okay, this is an equation. I've written this out as best I can on the top of the last page, and we'll come back to this next time because I think it is important. We can't leave the Sefer Yetzirah lines unexplained. But the two types of the letter nun are the significant ones. Bent over and subservient and saying, yes, God, you tell me not to do this, I will not do it. I have fear. That leads to purity. That leads to me having a very good smell, the connection of smell for this particular month. That is Mar Cheshvan and Menasha. Doing good is the previous month, the letter nun of the future, which is a straight line, meaning holiness, love of God, doing the positive commandments, standing, and that's the precondition. Right? It's not a very tightly constructed set of parallels, and if it's escaping you exactly how it works, that's okay, because we're just going to go on to the next thing and look about the next thing we'll look at will be the focus on the first book of Kings, chapter 12. Okay, so reasonably clear up to this point, right? Ephraim and Menasha being the two sons of Joseph, the two grandsons of Jacob, our father, right? Jacob places Ephraim before Menasha, the secondborn before the firstborn. Make me fruitful, God. Do good. Have wonderful experiences. And then Menasha comes second, forgetting all of the bad and all of the negative. First Tishri, then Cheshvan. First Ephraim, then Menasha. First do good, accumulate lots of good, enjoy and experience the good, and then walk away from doing the not so good. Okay?
Yeah.
Heavy stuff. Heavy stuff, but incredibly important and totally fundamental to the Hasidic worldview.